Just when it seemed like the Florida Panthers were ready to choke the life out of the Edmonton Oilers, the Oilers started mounting a comeback. First, it was Victor Arvidsson. Then it was Mattias Ekholm. And then, in overtime, the man who opened the scoring, Leon Draisaitl. On today's edition of Locked On NHL, how the Oilers mounted the comeback, why the Panthers shouldn't be that concerned, and what it all means going into game number 2.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is my good friend and co-host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. We want to thank everyone that is making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Visit Monarch Money today and use promo code NHL for 50% off your first year's subscription. Hunter, my friend, what a hockey game. That was my biggest takeaway from last night's game was, oh my God, this is what it looks like at the highest possible level. Two teams just throwing blows back and forth at each other. The Oilers came out of the gate hot. The Panthers controlled the middle third, and then the Oilers down the backstretch of this game and through the overtime period really showed their high-end ceiling. And this was a masterful hockey game. There weren't a lot of mistakes on either side. There weren't a lot of penalties. Some of that subjective, the referees letting things go to some degree. And man, just sitting here Thursday morning, it's hard not to feel like we're in for an all-time great final.
That was one of the best Stanley Cup Final games I've watched in recent memory. Just, you said it, and I tweeted this during the game last night. That game was a classic contest where two teams were just throwing haymakers at one another. Oh, we strike first. Oh, we're going to strike back. And that's exactly what happened. It was shift after shift, Nick. This wasn't just period after period. This was shift after shift. The Panthers would control a shift, and the Oilers would come right back down with the McDavid line. They would control a shift. Panthers would do the same thing, and then the Draisaitl line would come down and control a shift. It was fantastic to watch. And I said this on Locked On Penguins yesterday. I want this sequel to be even better than the original.
You want Empire Strikes Back?
Yes, I want Empire Strikes Back over New Hope. I want the Two Towers over Fellowship of the Ring. This might be a hot take, I want Top Gun Maverick over the original Top Gun. I think that one is a little bit better than the first one. Might be a hot take to some, but so far, so good on that. The Oilers, they get things going right away, 1-0. But the Panthers do what they do best, Nick. They never get rattled. That's been such a staple of their game these last 3 years. They never get rattled, even when they're down by a goal or two, or even when they're down, for example, 3-1 to the Bruins, 2-0 to the Maple Leafs in this series this year. Nothing ever seems to rattle them. And they rattle off a few straight goals. And normally, when they take a multi-goal lead in the playoffs, it's curtains. They're going to choke the life out of you. I keep coming back to the stat, Nick. 31-0. That was the Panthers' record when they have a lead under Paul Maurice at the end of the first or the second period. It is now 31-1 after what the Oilers did. Because really, it felt like once the Panthers went up 3-1, I'm like, ooh, I know the Oilers have all the firepower in the world, but this is what the Panthers live for. They love choking the life out of their opponents, suffocating you to death. But the thing was, Bob gave up a little bit of a softie to Arvidsson. He usually will make that save. And then right after that, especially in the third period, the Oilers just took it to the Panthers, man. They were by far the better team in that period. And then they were the better team after, I would say, the first 5 minutes of overtime. The Panthers, they came out with a purpose to start that OT, had a couple of really good chances. But once the Oilers kind of found their legs again, they were the better team for most of that overtime. But when you look at that game as a whole, it felt like it was evenly played. The Oilers, they more than dominated parts of it, but the Panthers did the same thing as well. And that's why I think we're going to be in for a instant classic here with this series.
So the big thing that jumped out to me, and I think this is a noticeable difference from last year, is you had the Oilers making a very conscious effort on the forecheck to throw that extra hit. Even if the puck's already gone, follow up, go through. Podkolzin and Kapanen only playing 11, 12 minutes a night. Both those guys were playing like they had rockets up their butt. I mean, just
I've never seen Kasperi Kapanen play like that, man. He turned into Connor McDavid on multiple shifts last night. And as someone who has seen Kasperi Kapanen play here for his team multiple times, I was like, where did this come from? Because I have never seen that before, man.
I mean, he had the one sequence in overtime where he went through the two Panthers defenders and he almost won the game. I mean, Bouchard had that look off the rush as well. McDavid had the one look where he came from the goal mouth across. He missed the open net, and just that's a notable difference. Evander Kane, same deal. I'm just going to thump you against the boards as hard as I can every single time. And even if the puck's gone, just to get you. And ultimately, and look, this is definitely me projecting a little bit, but Podkolzin being the lunatic he was on the forecheck last night is what forces that delay of game penalty that ultimately wins the Oilers the game on the power play in overtime. He's bearing down on the Panther defenseman. I think it was Nate Schmidt. I could be wrong. He was bearing down on the Panther defenseman, and rather than absorb the full body hit that's coming, he panics. He moves the puck a little bit sooner than he would like to. Delay of game. The Oilers come down, and then McDavid and Draisaitl get that synergy going. And the one last thing on the Oilers before we take our first break, and they highlighted this on the broadcast, so I do want to give them credit for pointing this out. One way the Oilers were able to create space was at the top of the offensive zone around the blue line, was creating those circle overlaps, whether it was Bouchard and McDavid, whether it was Draisaitl and McDavid, just as a means of creating conflict for those Florida defenders, because Florida is such a tight checking team. There was not a whole lot of room in that game for good stretches, especially in that middle segment where it was 3-1 for a little while. And you needed something outside of the ordinary to get back in that game at 3-1. And you got to go from a fourth liner in Arvidsson, someone who's been in and out of the lineup in these playoffs, an unconventional angle, a slap shot from a sharp angle. Bob usually, like you said, has that. It grazes underneath his his glove arm, where he usually has that, but he just flubbed it for whatever reason. He had a small screen, and that was the other point I wanted to make real quick before we get out of here for the first segment. The Oilers, as the game wore along, started to do a better job of getting traffic in front of Bobrovsky, and that's an essential component because Bob is so dominant down low, where it's pretty much impossible to score against him on the ice level. You have to get waves of traffic, and that's not just one guy. That's two guys at the same time as a shot's coming in, overlapping with each other to just make Bob's eyes, even if he sees some of it, not all of it. And the more conflict you create, the more pressure you put on guys to make plays, the better chances you have things are going your way. And I was reading Jack Hahn's newsletter this morning, breaking down game one. And the point he made very succinctly that I spent like 20 minutes rambling on today's Locked On Oilers about was, the Oilers want their defensemen in the play. They're the ones who are skating the puck out. They're happy to go D to D to reset to move the puck out. The Panthers, they want that first pass out. And you saw a lot of rims out. You saw a lot of oops out. Yes, the Oilers had to use the alley-oop a bit last night as well to break the Florida forecheck, but by and large, you saw the Oilers defense kind of rising to this moment and being significantly better than anything we saw from the Oilers defense in last year's Stanley Cup Final. I mean, night and day. When you talk about Klingberg and Wallman, and look, this was definitely the weakest Klingberg and Wallman have looked in a playoff series game so far, but they also had 60% of the expected goals in their minutes. So you add that up, and you get not a sustainable recipe because you don't want to go down 3-1, but you see the path here if you're the Oilers to what you need to do to be successful against this Panthers team.
I also thought was good? Brett Kulak. I thought he had one of his best games of the playoffs in game one last night. He was all over the ice, but the word I keep coming back to, Nick, is uncomfortable. That's the most uncomfortable I have seen the Panthers in the playoffs in quite some time, even against the Maple Leafs earlier this year in the playoffs. Yeah, they went down 2-0, but I never felt like they were uncomfortable. The Oilers, they made them uncomfortable. They were getting countless odd man rush chances. They were getting breakaways against them. They were forcing the Panthers into instantaneous, quick decisions that they kind of weren't prepared for or they haven't had to really deal with in the playoffs so far, and it was really hurting them. They were getting blasted on the forecheck at times. They were getting crushed in transition. They looked uncomfortable out there, especially in that third period where usually that's the time where the Panthers really take it to the opposition. Oilers just took it right to them, and it was only a matter of time before they were going to tie that game in the third period. Even the Panthers penalty kill, which is usually a strength, they got blasted in that game, especially in the overtime. And by the way, it was Nosek that took that penalty late in the overtime. But Panthers players, they were all out of position. Barkov had no chance there. The defensemen weren't far enough back. They were just getting absolutely crushed by Edmonton's power play. But again, that's the one word I really keep coming back to is uncomfortable. And Panthers, for at least a little over half of last night's game, they never looked comfortable. Yeah, they had some stretches where they were dominating. The start of overtime, a lot of the second period, even part of the first period towards the late stages of that period. But they still, for a full 60-plus minutes, they never looked comfortable. And that's going to be something I really want to see if the Oilers can keep doing as this series progresses. I did see a few things compared to last year that made me believe that Edmonton can really do it this time.
Setting up nicely for our conversation. Coming up next in the second segment of Locked On NHL today, Hunter and I are going to explain what didn't really work for the Panthers, what they could do to adjust, and a whole lot more. So be sure to stick around. We've got your team covered every day. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's really easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and start building real wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food, whether it was takeout, picking up something at the gas station, an extra cup of coffee. Now I'm budgeting a little bit smarter by meal prepping and saving more. And most importantly, you can use Monarch to set up long-term financial goals. Me, I planned a vacation, had to save up for it, and Monarch was the tool. Take control of your finances today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year subscription. One more time, that's monarchmoney.com/LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL with Hunter, Hodies, and I as we walk through an exhilarating game number 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. And pivoting the conversation a little bit more towards Florida in this second segment, the first thing I really noticed, and I wrote it down in my notes last night, was it's remarkable how much energy Florida plays with at all times as long as they've been doing this. I mean, this is 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals. And for 45 of the 70-ish, 80-ish minutes of this game, they were playing this game like their hair was on fire. I mean, they had such
That's the thing.
Yeah.
They played so much hockey these last 3 years, Nick. You wouldn't tell by the way they play. They look like they could play 2 more months and they wouldn't get gassed, honestly.
And they play an extremely high-pressure, physically demanding style that you think would weed out some of these guys. But they have found 12 forwards who all play like this is their last chance to ever make it in the NHL. And when you have star players like a Barkov, like a Reinhart, I thought Reinhart was tremendous last night. Especially defensively, I felt he was probably Florida's best forward. I was astounded with the dominance Florida had in the face-off circle last night. And they kept talking about it during the broadcast, and I don't really put a whole lot of stock in the face-offs as far as the big picture, how good a team is. But in a short sample size, like a 7-game series, and when Florida had won so many of those offensive zone face-offs in a row, and they have all of those set plays off of face-offs. I remember there was one where Bennett and Marchand started on opposite sides of each other, and they just completely interplayed. They went all the way around and set up the one-timer in the slot, and Stuart Skinner had to make a great save. So as far as Florida, number one, they got out to the quick start. The Bennett first goal is like the epitome of Sam Bennett, where he knows he got tripped. So I'm going to fall into the goalie because I have an excuse because I got tripped. It's great positional awareness. It's slimy and ratty as to be expected, and it gets you on the board. And first of all, Edmonton video coach. Did you not have access to the second angle that clearly showed Brett Kulak trip him? The first angle they showed, I was like, oh my God, yeah, he didn't touch him at all. He just fell down. And then immediately TNT cuts to the second angle where Kulak and Bennett's legs are tied up and he careens into Skinner. 1-0. And then because the NHL has made that such a steep penalty, you take a delay a game for that. And they go up, they score 2 straight goals in a minute and a half. And everybody's looking around like, oh my God, Florida's doing it again. If you recall the regular season game, these two teams played back in, I think it was February, where the Oilers had a 4-2 lead, and then the Panthers scored 3 straight goals in the third period to win the game, culminating in a Reinhart goal that banked in off the back of Stuart Skinner's head. You came back from 3-1 down. And real quick, I'm going to throw it back to you. I thought Florida played a pretty good game. You know, the Bob goal, he give the Arvidsson goal, you want Bob to have. But other than that, man, the Ekholm goal, McDavid pulls 3 guys to the net front and all 3 of them miss it. He makes that pass 100 times. They intercepted probably 90 of them. But that's the kind of breaks you need if you're the Oilers. And that's, if you're the Panthers, that's the type of break you can't afford to have.
Right. And then the game winner, he had no chance on the Draisaitl one. That's just an easy pass. No one is covering Draisaitl on the power play.
I stood up and screamed because I knew it was in. All you had to do was hit the net.
That was an easy one. It was literally a tap-in. That's literally what it was. The Panthers were trying everything in their power to get back to double overtime because if they were going to kill the rest of that penalty off to start the double overtime. And then who knows what happens after that at 5-on-5. It's funny, Nick. That's the only penalty that gets called in an overtime like that in the Stanley Cup Final. The refs will swallow the whistles. They will not call anything, no matter how big a hit is, anything like that. The only penalty they will call is delay a game. So when you force a ref to call a penalty, no, you really did screw up, especially in overtime. But the Panthers, they shouldn't overreact. They shouldn't panic. They've been in this situation countless times before. And you're right. I thought they played fairly well. Reinhart was great. I thought Barkov mostly had a decent game, not on the penalty.
Marchand really looked good too.
He was awesome. You could tell he knows that this might be one of his last runs at a potential second Stanley Cup. He's been to obviously other Stanley Cup finals. He's only won one. But I think he knows that obviously he's reaching the end of his career, Nick. This could be his last best shot at winning a second Stanley Cup for his career. He was great. He was being ratty throughout the ice all over, bumping into people, trying to get them off.
When he did the very subtle bump to McDavid going by him during a stoppage. That was very funny.
And then Sam Bennett, I think he was, outside of Reinhart, I think he was the best player on the ice for the Panthers. He was sensational all game. He gets the breakaway goal. He almost scores a bit later to get the hat trick. He was awesome last night. And yeah, we can talk for days about what his next contract is going to look like.
Believe me, we have content to do in July. We will talk a lot about Sam Bennett and his 100%. Money.
But he was fantastic for the Panthers last night. He plays the villain role so well. I was talking to my friend last night. We were watching the game at a bar since we're at the beach this week. And if Sam Bennett had scored the overtime winner, I wanted him to be like, are you not entertained to the cause because of how great of a villain he is? But I thought he was really good. You know, I also thought played well, Nick? Seth Jones. I think he's having a really good playoff run for the Panthers. This is the best hockey I have seen him play since
in a long time.
Days. I thought he played really well too. And I really want to see what the Panthers keep doing with the Tkachuk, Bennett, Verhaeghe line. Really good at 5-on-5, a little over 16 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. When they were on the ice, they had 63% of the shot attempts, 2 goals for, 2 goals against, but also, you know, they had 14 scoring chances for, 7 scoring chances against. I want to see if they can continue to have that line cook in this series, but I'm really not too concerned. Bob, the goals that he gave up outside of the Arvidsson one, he had no chance on. Florida's big guns answer the call, but hey, Edmonton's big guns, they are built different, man. It might really just be Connor and Leon's time, but hey, it's only one game. I'm excited to see what we can expect in game 2, and that's coming up in the final segment here.
Beautifully teed up. We will be right back. We're going to explain what we're looking for in game number 2, why it matters so much that Draisaitl had the game when he did in the greater context of the series, why Stuart Skinner is becoming dependable. Did I really just say that? All right, we'll be right back after this quick break. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL after a scintillating game number 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. And Hunter, I'm going to start with Leon because last year in the Stanley Cup Final, didn't have a single goal, only a couple of assists, playing with a broken rib, a broken finger. was only recording like 2 shots on goal per game. Last night, he had 9 scoring chances alone in game number 1, something I think he almost had for the entire series last year. And you saw consciously Knoblauch play him and McDavid separately until they needed to. And matchups wise, that opens up so many more opportunities for the Oilers, because then the Panthers have to make a conscious decision, especially because the Oilers have last change. If they put Barkov out there, who do the Oilers put out there? If they have Tkachuk out there, who do the Oilers put out there? And you saw Leon last night answer the bell emphatically. And I think the way I knew the Oilers were ready, and of course this is hindsight because they won the game, but the first goal, Leon wins a foot race to cancel out an icing. He eats 2 monster hits in the corner a minute into the game. He gets up to his feet, collects himself. The forwards that are out there with him work the puck down low. They create a big rebound, and Draisaitl hammers that rebound home. Nothing Bob could have done. I did think Bob's rebound control was a bit wonky last night. I know the Oilers had a lot of puck possession, but he was giving up some really big rebounds, especially on those down low inner plays that the Oilers make so great. And the one other thing I did want to bring up before I throw it back to you as far as things I'm looking for, I'll be very curious to see how the Oilers handle any future situations where Corey Perry happens to be in the box and they have a power play opportunity. Because last night during that 4-on-3, they went with the 3 lefties. They went with McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, and Bouchard at the point. And God bless Nuge, he's a great hockey player. He's not a net front guy. And being left-handed takes away angles for both one-timers and additional passes. And with Hyman out for the series and Perry in the box, they had a few good looks, but it was a lot of Nuge sweeping his stick at the puck like a broom as opposed to being able to make something happen. And I'm very curious how the Oilers handle that. Is that a situation where you're going to try and get Victor Arvidsson there, but he's only 5'11", he's a little bit smaller, he's not going to be able to win those leverage battles? Would you dare put Kasperi Kapanen there to occupy space to chase down loose pucks? Because you need right-handedness, and it's so essential on the power play that you have the angles to work that, and it's why we typically see a 3-and-2 alignment of 3 with one-handedness and 2 in another.
Right. No, I agree with that. I'm going to go a little opposite from you with this and focus a little bit on the Panthers for what I'm looking for. I want to see Matthew Tkachuk be a little bit more engaged in game 2.
Okay.
I don't know. I just didn't notice him as much last night. It looked like he was still really battling that injury that he's been dealing with for a good chunk of the season, the one that he suffered during the Four Nations face-off. And don't get me wrong, his line with Verhaeghe and Bennett was really good last night. It was the Panthers' best line, but I feel like a lot of that was propped up by both Bennett and Verhaeghe. I want to see Tkachuk be a bit more engaged. I know he has another level that he can get to. It just, he looked a step slow, and we're not used to seeing that out of him, especially during the game's biggest moment. So that's the big area that I want to focus on, Nick, for game 2. If the Panthers can get Tkachuk's best version, they're obviously going to be even tougher to beat. But I was just watching him a lot last night and jotting some notes down, and I was just like, doesn't look like the Tkachuk that we saw even last round, the previous 2 rounds. And yeah, I know he was just coming back from injury, but it's only 1 game. But I think he has another level that he can get to.
Oh, for sure. I think that's the beauty of a best-of-7 series is it's very much like a game of chess. You start out slowly and you start building up towards it. And it creates so many different permutations where we could talk about, all right.
Playoffs. So don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's been bad. He's been very good, but I just felt like last night he looked a little bit of a step slow, looked like his injury was getting to him a little bit. I think he can get back to the level that we've seen the previous 3 rounds, but I just don't want this to become like a big issue considering how great of a player he is.
Of course. And that's really one of that's what we talk about, the privilege and the burden of greatness. Yeah. We know you're capable of something special. Show us. Let us see it. I mean, you saw McDavid and Draisaitl put together one last night where it wasn't the prettiest. It wasn't how you would draw it up. But as that game went along, it really did turn into a battle of wills. There were, 10 icings in the third period and overtime between these 2 teams, how aggressive the respective forechecks were in trying to pressure the defenseman trying to break out. It felt like the overtime period really hit a slog around that 10-minute mark where it was just a series of icings back and forth and the game really kind of slowed down. And then it picked back up as it went along, as it's inclined to do. Games go in cycles of ebbs and flows. But the Florida perspective I'm most curious from is what the coaching point is going to be as far as the Oilers forecheck. Because you saw the Oilers forecheck as aggressively as you have seen them all year, whether that's, and we've been highlighting Kapanen and Podkolzin in particular, because those are guys who, only going to play 12, 13 minutes a game. And that's their job, is go get the puck for the other guys on your line, skate as hard and as imposing as you can, and make something happen. So what is the coaching point if you're Florida? Is it our forwards need to not fly the zone as fast so they can receive that first breakout pass so we don't need to go to the rim or to the alley-oop? Or are you going to do what Edmonton did and lean on the alley-oop and try and break out the forecheck that way? And look, I'm not the biggest fan of the alley-oop out of the zone. I think you did all of the work to earn possession. You shouldn't turn possession into a 50-50 proposition, to quote Mike Sullivan. We don't want hope plays. We want to know where the puck's going when we move it. That's what you want to see if you're Florida. And Florida, like you had said before, this is the first time in recent memory I can recall Florida's defense actively struggling to break out. And because Florida is so lethal in so many different ways, where they're comfortable in transition, they're comfortable cycling the puck. And you saw a little bit of that last night, where Bennett was eager to carry the puck in. He carries the puck into the offensive zone at the highest rate of anyone on the Panthers. And you also have the Panthers lines who are more than happy. All right, dump it in, go hammer the poor defenseman who's got to recover this puck, and let's go to work. But the Oilers found something that worked for them. I cannot wait to see how Florida tries to adjust, especially defensively, to that forecheck.
Right, and their defensemen just weren't as mobile last night. It took them.
They didn't look as good. Yeah,
it took them a lot longer, at least from my eye, to go from defense to offense, especially in their own zone. And they were also taking a beating behind the net. The Oilers were really upping the physicality, kind of trying to send a message to the Panthers, Nick, being like, "Hey, we know how physical you guys are. We know you guys play like a bunch of rats, but we're going to take the fight to you guys." Unlike last year, where the Panthers obviously did the opposite, and then they went on to win the cup. But still, I didn't like how immobile some of the Panthers defensemen looked at times. And I do think that's going to be one key area of emphasis that Paul Maurice is going to be looking at for adjustments for game 2. I think they're going to be a lot quicker with their breakouts from their own zone. I expect the Panthers they obviously played really well in game 1 for the most part. There's obviously a lot of stretches where the Oilers also dominated play, especially in the third period, a lot of overtime, a good chunk of the first period. But I also expect the Panthers to play even better in game 2. They still thrive on these types of situations, and I still think we're going to be in line for an instant classic here with the Stanley Cup Final.
Okay, 2 last things before we get out of here. Number 1, at one point from the start of the third period through about the 8-minute mark of overtime, the Oilers outshot the Panthers 21-5. Dramatic game control, great defense. We talked about that last week on Locked On NHL, how great the Oilers were defensively in games 4 and 5 against the Stars, where there just wasn't room. As much as the Stars had the puck, they couldn't do a whole lot with it. And then the last question. All right, I'm putting you on the spot here based on a conversation I was having with someone last night. Let's say we're playing hockey in gym class. We're playing ball hockey. Obviously, McDavid is the first pick. Is the second pick Sasha Barkov, or is it Leon Draisaitl?
Wow.
Two teams. Two teams. Take your pick. Do you want Draisaitl or Barkov if we were to play ball hockey in gym class? The other team already has McDavid.
Actually, you know what? I might do See, I want to go Leon, but Barkov is just such a good defensive center. I'm going to go Barkov just because having that, like both the offense and the defense combined, and I'm going to go Barkov.
Okay. I was curious because I did this entire exercise as part of my series prep. I listed out both rosters like it was gym class, like they were on the end line, right. And I put together 2 teams. And my instinct was Draisaitl goes second because the offense will always be more valuable than the defense. And yes, that gives the other team McDavid and Barkov on 2 separate lines, which is equally terrifying. But then if you're Draisaitl's team, if you're Barkov's team, who do you take third? And it creates a really good thought exercise for as far as how you feel about the talent in this series. And make no mistake, these are clearly the 2 best teams in the NHL. I don't think anyone in either conference is particularly close to the levels we're seeing from these 2 teams. It has been remarkable to watch them both rise to the occasion as the playoffs have gone along. And last night, they gave us a treat. that was remarkable hockey. I can't wait for game 2 tomorrow night. Hunter and I want to thank everyone that made Locked On NHL.
Six more games of this, King. 6 more games of this, brother.
Oilers in 4, please. My heart can't take it, man. As puck dropped, my heart rate was like 67, 70, a little elevated. And as the game wore along, 90, 95, the overtime was about 95 steady. They take the power play up to 101, 102. Oilers in 4 would be nice. I'm not holding my breath. I expect this to go 6 or 7 games. Hunter and I want to thank everyone that made Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Thank you to everyone who is subscribed. If you're not, please, there is no better time. Jump in on the fun. Subscribe to Locked On NHL wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Let us know in the comments your thoughts about game number 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. Be sure to check out Locked On NHL Game Night after games go final. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next Thursday. Until then, everyone enjoy the Stanley Cup Final.